The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the OSIP Foundation Incorporated or any other group or individual. This podcast may contain dialogue or subject material that could be considered for mature audiences only. All aspects of How You Play the Game and the OSIP Foundation Incorporated are protected by copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Unauthorized use without the express written consent of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated is strictly prohibited. If you're interested in sponsoring How You Play the Game, please email us at podcast@osipfoundation.org. Your sponsorship may be tax deductible. Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of How You Play the Game, the official podcast of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated. Yours truly, Jack Furlong, with you as we talk about what's going on as far as the world of sportsmanship is concerned. This is the second episode of, or technically the first and only episode of the month of July. We skipped our first one just due to a combination of people being sick and people being on vacation. We sincerely apologize for that, but we're back and we're better than ever. So this is July of 2024. Glad you could be with us. As always, check us out online at osipfoundation.org, on social media at facebook.com/osipfoundation, X and Instagram at osipfoundation, hashtag how you play the game. If you would like to contact the show, please use the email address podcast@osipfoundation.org. So today we want to do a quick one on something that I noticed in the world of baseball. I was watching the series between the visiting New York Mets and the host Pittsburgh Pirates recently, and there was an umpiring crew that was there, which was crewed by Marvin Hudson and included Hunter Wendelstedt, John Tumpane, and Nick Marley. And this crew served for the entire series, so they were there for every game, rotating around and whatnot. And as I watched the series, you could see that there was tension on the field. It was noted by commentators. There was an ejection at one point. It was just it was a little weird. And then when you begin to look at the umpiring forums, like our friends over at Close Call Sports, you can see that there are a lot of people who follow umpires who are noting that this crew has had a real tough year. And that got me thinking about, how does an umpiring crew have a tough year? And what does that mean for the players and the broadcasters and the fans and everyone who's involved in the game as a result? So I started looking at it a little bit. And I think what is important to recognize here is that any umpiring crew is like any team in a sport, or really any business, that has employees, where you have people who spend a lot of time together, who work together, who have a common goal, and sometimes it's just not, something's not clicking, okay? The chemistry is just sometimes not there. Now, you don't always have to have perfect chemistry in any of these teams. Look at any sports team in any league at any level, and you'll note that there's just sometimes not perfect chemistry, but they get the job done. Now sometimes not having good chemistry does lead to just bad results or poor results. Things don't get done, and we've seen that not just in sports. We've seen it in business. I mean, think about any time that you've been working a job where you have a coworker or a number of coworkers or a boss or something like that, where you're just not on the same page, and that makes it very difficult to do your job. That could be similar to what's going on with this crew. And you take all these different factors and the intangibles that come with these factors, and you start looking at them over the course of the season. Remember that this is the crew that was in New York when Hunter Wendelstedt was behind the plate and ejected Aaron Boone for something that a fan said. And granted, there was, a story. I mean, we did a podcast about it. There was an explanation from Wendelstedt himself. There's all this other stuff and whatnot. So you can look at this and say, okay, we've seen stuff like this before. You can go back and you can look at the scorecards, if you will, of how each umpire on this crew has fared when they work the plate, when they look at potentially challenged calls and whether or not they get overturned or anything like that. And analytically speaking, there are many people who are in these forums who will objectively look at these statistics and say, geez, this is not really adding up the way that we would like. And that can happen for any number of reasons, just like it can happen for any number of reasons on any sports team or any business team, But it's not so much about what's happening and why it's happening. In this instance especially, it's more about what's going on with those around them and how they're adapting to that. It's the empathy towards the ultimate goal that needs to be examined. And this what really pushed me to look at this was when John Tumpane was behind the plate in the game between the Mets and the Pirates. Now, if you don't know the history of John Tumpane and Pittsburgh, it was probably about 8 years ago. I want to say it was 2017 when John Tumpane was in Pittsburgh working a series, and he went for a run that day before he worked the plate that night. And he was on the Roberto Clemente Bridge, and he saw a woman who looked like she was about to jump. And John Tumpane saved this woman's life. He grabbed this woman and brought her back from the brink of suicide. And it was a story that got picked up by print media, by news media. People did interviews, and Tumpane basically, in that moment just said, hey, I'd like to hang around, but I got to go work the plate tonight at PNC Park. And then the next night, the Pirates did something amazing. They brought the umpires out before the game and introduced them one at a time. And Tumpane went last, and he's working third for this game. He just, the night before, which was the same day that he saved this woman's life, he worked the plate. And you could see the tears in his eyes as the city of Pittsburgh stood and applauded him. And to me, that transcends baseball, that transcends sports. That almost is a situation where I feel like you've just got the key to the city. You can do no wrong here. And in this game, in the present day, Tumpane was the one who made strike calls to, I believe it was Jack Sawinski who was at the plate, that led to the ejection of Pirates manager Derek Shelton. And all of a sudden, the fans in that moment forgot that John Tumpane saved a woman's life. If you go back and you look at the post-game processing of those pitches that Tumpane called, you will see that there was an adjustment made, which is what happens. If you're unfamiliar with this, remember, the box that you see on TV is as unofficial as the yellow line for first down in football. Okay? They don't adjust that box. And the pitches in question were outside of the box. However, after each game, Major League Baseball does a post-game processing where they do adjust the box, and they try and figure out whether or not the pitches were appropriately called. And after that post-game processing, when they adjust the box for each hitter, the pitches in question fell within the 2-inch margin of error that Major League Baseball uses to evaluate its umpires. So all of a sudden, we went from a heat of the moment bad call to a he got it right call. And you know what? If you want to continue to argue over whether or not that's appropriate, that's a separate conversation. More importantly, John Tumpane was fine in the eyes of his employers, and the people of Pittsburgh forgot that he's a hero. And this type of tension, if you will, continued throughout that entire series. And it was exacerbated by fans who were not fans of the umpires during that series, by broadcasters who continued to harp on the fact that they thought that these calls were missed, even a day later. Like, if you want to say in the moment they looked like bad calls, well, at least do your homework so that the next day you find out that they were actually considered correct calls in the eyes of the league, and report that. Don't omit that and continue to create tension amongst the fans and the umpires. That's not good sportsmanship. Okay? So when you step back and you continue to see this stuff, okay, that in itself then made me realize that we're talking about the crew of umpires that has been, for lack of a better term, criticized by the umpire community about having a bad season. And we've all had bad seasons as umpires. We've all had bad chunks of time as employees, right? Okay, we've all been there. We've all had just this time where we've had to grind through it. It happens to everybody. And I guess the most important thing that I want to say as we look at this from a macro point of view is that why is it that the teams in question don't have the scouting reports on the umpires? And they do scouting reports, but they don't have them this in depth. Or at least they don't tell us that they do. Why don't they have scouts working for these teams saying the crew that is coming in is struggling? And if you want this crew to do a good job, you have to make it comfortable for them. Because for me, if I'm managing one of these teams and I have the information prior that says this crew of 4 umpires who are coming in are having a tough time, and I see it as if I want the calls to be correct, I better keep my mouth shut. I better do what I can to make sure that these guys feel comfortable, because they're already probably feeling tense. They're already probably feeling stressed. And if I make it worse, I could dig my team, or I have the potential to dig my team a deeper hole. Consider that. And instead, because of how we act naturally through toxic masculinity and through the emotion and the testosterone that just naturally flows during athletic competition, we ignore that. And we just argue. And we think that arguing in these situations is going to influence officials to give us calls. Now, why would officials do that, knowing that then they're going to piss off somebody else on the other side? So, in a situation like this, I guess my point is, why are we not doing our homework? Why are we not if we these teams spend so much time and money providing so much information to their players and their coaches? Why is that information on the umpires beyond just the scouting report of he calls fewer inside strikes, or he goes, he'll go an inch or two on the outside corner of the plate? Why aren't we gathering more information? Why don't we have scouts looking at the umpire forums to try and gather information? And even if we do, why do we continue this facade of creating more tension? It just seems counterintuitive, let alone dumb. and how quickly we forget that these people can be heroes. Nick Marley, who's the four-man on this crew, okay? He has the least experience out of the four guys on this crew. He's a veteran of the Air Force, okay? He's a hero too. He served in the Air Force before he became an umpire. Now, we in this country have a big salute to service, right? So right there, the bottom two guys on this crew, John Tumpane and Nick Marley, are heroes. 50% of this crew are considered heroes, and we still don't treat them properly. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I look at Hunter Wendelstedt, who's the two-man on this crew, okay? Hunter Wendelstedt is probably so darn frustrated. All right, the dude has been passed over for crew chief, whether he wants it or not many times. Okay, he operates the only umpire school in the country that still takes its graduates and selected members into minor league baseball. Everything else is now controlled by Major League Baseball instead of these outside entities. Okay, he had the situation with Aaron Boone early this season, and he's probably thinking, "Great, I'm not getting the playoffs at all this year," and he's probably out there so frustrated he's just calling pitches that are so far outside for strikes, saying, "My plate score doesn't matter. My job is secure, and my plate score doesn't matter." He just wants to get in and get out. And I'm not saying that because that's a negative thing. I'm trying to get you to empathize with where this guy is. Okay? Think about that. If you're on the road, God knows how many nights and weeks and months out of the year, away from your family, away from your home, and you know that you're not working towards anything like that, are you really going to give it your all? I would say that there's a chance that you're not. You're probably just thinking, I just want to get out of here. That's not laziness in this situation. It's human nature, and it's something that we have to combat regularly. Rather than put a negative connotation on it, think about how that has affected each one of us. All right, it's real. It is real. These are real emotions, and to deny that is short-sighted. So what I'm asking listeners to do is to take another step back here when it comes to this kind of stuff. And it's not solely for baseball. It's for any sport. Okay? People have bad days. People have bad months. People have bad seasons. Okay? Crew dynamics, the dynamics of a working team are very real. And they're intangible. They can't always be measured. And even when they can be measured, sometimes we choose to ignore it. A quick anecdote. My girlfriend was telling me a story about how her company at the time, when COVID hit and everyone went remote, okay, production for that company while everyone was remote was up 33%, the highest increase they had seen in a long time. And when everything died down and you could return to the office, you know what the company did? Said you got to come back in, at least 50%, depending upon your role. Some people could stay out longer, other people had to be in more, etc. They ignored the statistics that said, geez, company production's up, we're making money, this, that. No. They said, we just invested all this money in these offices. We're going to get some bang for our buck here, get our money's worth, to use a ridiculous umpire quote. And we're going to make people come back in. We're going to cut our nose to spite our face. That's what's happening. Sometimes we just ignore this stuff. We purposefully ignore what's right in front of us. Because why? The umpire is the enemy of both teams, and we're supposed to bash the umpire. Yelling at umpires is part of the game. Try again, folks. Try again. Well, I want to thank you for joining us for this short little mid-month episode. Thanks again for staying with us as we missed one. We will be back in just a few short weeks with Sean Ryan joining me. And until then, remember, you can check us out online at osipfoundation.org. On social media, we're at facebook.com/OSIP X and Instagram at OSIP Foundation, #HowYouPlayTheGame. And of course, if you'd like to contact the show, please use the email address podcast@osipfoundation.org. So again, we'll talk to everybody in just a few short weeks. And until then, my friends, treat each other with respect. How You Play the Game is a production of the OSIP Foundation, Incorporated. The producer-engineer of this episode is Sean Ryan. Music by Soundspring Studio. The executive producer of How You Play the Game is Jack Furlong. For more information, visit osipfoundation.org.